From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. Do you use the expression, my friend? Thank you, my friend. Hold on, my friend. Good to see you, my friend. I find my friend really, really off-putting. I think it's because I heard it. Have you and I talked about this before? Oh my God, this is a problem when you get older. Okay, people who are younger than me, I need a little understanding right now. People who are my age or older, you're gonna get this. We repeat ourselves. We have conversations with people. I myself have a conversation with you every single day, and I lose track sometimes of what we've already talked about. And I actually go to great pains. I take notes. I take copious notes after every show. When I do a little air check, I listen to the program, I make any necessary edits, and during that process, I've got a spreadsheet where I have notes about each episode. And a big part of that are notes on things we've talked about. So even I, with using that process, even I forget. So imagine what it's like just in regular life when you're not taking notes about everything. Imagine if you had to take notes about every conversation you had. If you were like this kind of hyper journal keeper, every time you had a conversation, you had to sit down and make notes about it. That's actually not a bad idea, now that I think about it. I think we'd have a lot of insight. I was just having a conversation with Martin the other day. You guys know Martin, program director at River West Radio, our flagship station. And I forget how the subject came up. Oh yeah, he was telling me some things I really needed to remember. And I said I should be taking notes. And it reminded me that back in my grad school days, studying for my master's in education, I did quite a lot of research and presented some findings, some papers on note-taking, and discovered really how vitally important it is if you're a student, but even just for everyone in our regular lives. It's really great if you want to learn something. And I think this is great as you read books. People who take notes as they read books, they write in the margins, or they, I think that's fantastic. If you really are interested in retaining knowledge about something you're reading about, or you're talking about for that matter, yeah, notes are the best thing. Handwritten notes. And I'll give you the thumbnail version of what I learned. First of all, it's got to be handwritten. It cannot be electronic, unless you're handwriting with a wand, they call it, the pen and the tablet. That's fine. That counts as handwriting. Because the physiology of it, there's this connection between your muscles and your brain. Don't ask me to explain the details of it, because honestly, I don't know. But there's a connection when it's physical, when it's in your hand, when you're handwriting. Okay, so take notes, take a lot of notes, handwriting. And it's not just copying down, I think a lot of us have had some very basic sort of cursory education about note-taking at some point in our schooling. You don't just write down every word the teacher is saying or the professor or whoever. No, you get the highlights. You try to keep up with what seems important in the moment. But more importantly, or just as importantly, it's so beneficial to do a couple of other things. One of them is doodling, drawing pictures. You want to doodle while you're taking notes. And everybody doodles, right? You make little stars or kind of those spirograph pinwheel kind of designs, or all these little interconnected boxes, whatever your doodling preference is. Doodle as you take notes. So you're just always moving. You're always going. Taking notes, doodling here, doodling there. And part of your doodling, and this is where it gets kind of fun, if you're at all a creative person, if you're a visual person at all, as you're taking notes, something seems particularly important, you put it in big cartoon font or something. You draw a big circle around it. You underline it several times. You put exclamation points. And I used to like putting, the on the old Batman cartoons, when they'd be in the fight and it'd go bam, pow, kaboom. And they'd have these kind of star-shaped balloons around those onomatopoeic words. Is onomatopoeic a word? Anyway, yeah, that was a preference of mine, those kind of starred balloons. The other thing you can do, I found really beneficial, both in my personal experience and again, I did some research on this. You got a page of notes and drawings and doodles, and you hear something that relates to something you heard earlier. And so you're highlighting your own notes in the moment. So, there's a thought. Kierkegaard said such and such. And you circle it. Because, wait, I heard that earlier. And then, quick glance up. There's a drawing of Freud smoking a cigar. Freud said something very similar. So you circle it up there, and then you connect it with a line. So now it's two connected circles. This is a great thing to do while you're reading, if you don't mind really screwing up your books. Some people like to keep their books pristine. I confess I have conflicting feelings about this. I love a pristine book. But as you're reading, that's also a really terrific method. Of course, yellow highlighters, we all have done that. You highlight as you read. Okay. Try not to highlight too much. It becomes counterproductive if you do too much. But this circle and then a line to another circled phrase or word is really a great benefit. Because some texts can be very dense. You just kind of get lost in... Boy, when I was an undergrad in philosophy, man, there were some things I had to read 2 and 3 and 4 times, and I still didn't get it. But this is a great, great note-taking technique for both when you're reading the circle line to another circle. And then that can go to another one. So now you got this web that's happening. But that also works as you're taking lecture notes as well. So lots of drawing, lots of doodling, use different fonts, underline, make balloons and squares and stars. And then this is huge. This one is huge. And that's the personal note. And I always designated that with a PN, personal note. You can choose however you want to designate yours. But as you're taking in the lecture, the presentation, hopefully you're going to have a thought or two of your own, or a question. In fact, now that I think about it, I'd forgotten I did this. It was PN and Q. Those are the two designators. So I have a certain thought. Freud was almost right, but he got this part wrong. I remember once when my mother did such and such, and it made me feel this way. Anyway, I'm having a personal thought that's been triggered by the lecture. So I very quickly write PN. I do a quick little note on that thought. I don't get too intensely buried into that thought because I want to stay with the lecture. But it's just a reminder. Oh yeah, this, and I can check on this later. But it gave me this personal thought. So PN, personal note. And then, as I just alluded to, if I have a question, which I would hope while you're taking in a lecture, you might come up with some questions. You might even have an opportunity afterwards to ask that question. So big old Q, make sure it's highlighted, make sure it's starred or somehow stands out. And you write your question briefly. And then you can get back to the live moment of the lecture or the presentation and continue taking your notes. So lots of drawing, lots of doodling, lots of personal notes, lots of questions. And that is how you take notes. And believe me, the time will fly by. You ever been bored in a lecture? Maybe you brought your little, you brought your phone out, you're recording the lecture, and you think that's taking notes? No, believe me, that's not taking notes. Still not a bad idea. If you want to just kind of double down and have that for reference later, that's fine. Go ahead and do it. But it is no substitute for handwritten notes. I couldn't be a more enthusiastic advocate for handwritten notes in all areas. If you're learning something on the job, if you're a student in school, if you're just someone out enjoying a lecture or a presentation, or I never really thought about this until I got into it. Maybe even just in your personal life, if you're having a conversation with someone, as long as it doesn't impede on the conversation. If you want to sit and doodle and take notes, why not? Why not? So then the next step is a little more familiar and things you may have heard. This is more common advice. You want to type up your notes. And when you do type them up, then you take that opportunity to expand on the notes. Now it's written more formally, more complete thoughts, complete sentences, a more formal structure. You take your personal notes, you can expand on those if you want to. You can toss something that after consideration, maybe it's not relevant. Put your questions in a separate spot. If you got answers, all the better. So it's the note taking, then it's reviewing the notes, then it's typing the notes, and then finally, and this goes back to traditional students, traditional education, you're going to be tested on this. You're going to have an exam of some sort. Then from time to time before that exam date, you're going to want to review, just kind of look over your typed notes. And if you need to cram the night before, there they are for you, along with all of your other materials. So that's note taking. How did I get on to this? I started by asking a question, and that was what you thought of my friend, the expression when you call someone my friend. And somehow, I don't really remember how I got from there to this. That's okay. That's all right. It's not important. But let me go back to my friend. Boy, it's going to bug me now. How did I get onto this? Well, it's a podcast. It's a recording. I can go back and listen, so I'm not going to worry about it. I'll find out later. All right, the expression my friend. I think I have such a bad feeling about that phrase because I've heard it used I know how I got on this. I asked your forgiveness for repeating myself. Because I often repeat myself, even though I take notes on every episode. That's how I've connected the dots. I've circled and connected the lines. So I remember now. That's a great weight off my mind. I've heard the expression my friend used way too often, sarcastically, when you're actually angry with someone. I've never used it myself, but I've heard it. It's a very common little turn of phrase. When you're angry with someone, or you're about to correct them, or you're about to school them, as people like to say. Hold on, my friend. You just rear-ended my car, and you're not going to drive off, my friend. I was just pulling out of my parking spot. It's nothing. We just bumped bumpers. That's what they're for. And that's what bumpers are for? Hold on, my friend. Yeah, I don't like the expression my friend. And then other people use it sincerely and lovingly. But the problem is, even then, I find it really affected. I always use that word incorrectly. With an affect. My friend. It becomes sort of rote. I've criticized Rachel Maddow on this program several times, and I've gotten in trouble for it because she's beloved. All liberals love Rachel Maddow. But she uses it pretty much on a nightly basis. Anytime I've ever watched her program, and I don't watch it that regularly, but every time I have, she comes on after the previous host, which I think, I think it's Chris Hayes, if I remember correctly. But every single night, she uses that same, what sounds to me like an affectation. Thank you, my friend. Much appreciated. Now, I'm someone who does media. I have my little friendly little podcast here 5 days a week. Well, 4 days a week. We run a repeat on Fridays. I don't know if you're aware of that. It's our little secret. So 4 days a week, I talk with you. And I have my little scripted opening from the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee. I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. But beyond that, I'm sure I have some phrases that I lean into too heavily, that I rely on, that I fall back on way too easily. I'm sure there are some words and phrases. I can't think of any right now off the top of my head, but I'll bet you could. I'm sure you could. So, okay. But to open her show, thank you, my friend. Much appreciated. Why does that bother me? I mean, we need better vocabulary here. It's not that it bothers me. I don't lose any sleep over it, but I find it slightly annoying. I don't like the expression "my friend." Am I alone on this? Do you share this feeling at all? We did a program on pet peeves recently, and I guess I could include that as kind of a pet peeve. And it's not, as I remember, as I said at the time, it's not something I feel I need to convince you about. I don't have to tell you that I'm right and you're wrong. You must find this phrase offensive and off-putting because I do. No, strictly personal thought, opinion here. Maybe it's part of my misophonia. Is that what it's called? We did a whole episode, or at least a whole segment about that too. The misophonia. I think I'm remembering the correct term. The psychological sort of disorder that certain sounds, especially kind of mouth sounds, people chewing, can just drive some people right up the wall. I have a bit of that, and I guess it's kind of related to, there are some words, the example we always hear about is moist. Some people hear the word moist and they just run screaming from the room. I don't understand that myself, but maybe that's why I don't like my friend. Maybe it's related. Maybe it's part of that whole area of psychological maladies. But I consider just a little pet peeve. Here's another one. Here's another pet peeve. Unrelenting kindness. Some people, it's really tough when there's sort of a continuum, like really mean, rude people on one end of the spectrum and really kind people on the other end, and a continuum in between. You got to kind of hit the sweet spot, or at least be in an acceptable range. There's some people who are too rude, and that's, kind of obvious. But for me, I often find people are being way too kind. I'll give you an example. I met a guy recently. He was a friend of a friend, and we were both helping out the mutual friend. I'm not going to name any names. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Anyway, we met for the first time helping our mutual friend. And we'd heard about each other from the mutual friend, so we kind of knew each other. In fact, we'd even spoken on the phone a couple of times, kind of coordinating our get-together to help the friend, all right? So when he meets me, and this was right at the end, sort of at the end of COVID, at least in America, in the U.S., when mask orders were starting to fall away. And there were a lot of unmasked people, and the CDC changed their guidelines, so it was right at that point. I guess this would have been mid to late May of 2021. All right, so I meet this guy. I'm holding a couple of things, and so I can't really shake his hand, which I wasn't going to do anyway. I don't really shake hands anymore, especially since COVID. I'm never going to shake hands again. I'm Howie Mandel from here on out until I die. The shaking hands is all over for me. So I offer my elbow to him, hoping that he'll offer his elbow to me in our greeting. And he said, "Oh, I'm not having any of that." And he pulled me in and he gave me the biggest bear hug, this bro hug that you've ever had. And for cis hetero guys, there's a certain boundary to hugging. And one of the ways you cross that boundary is when you're scraping facial hair, when you're scraping stubble, when you're stubble to stubble. That's getting in too close and too tight. I'm not a big hugger anyway, okay? Just generally speaking, I'm not a big hugger. I hug people I love. I hug my family. I hug my kids. But out in the world, I don't generally hug people. And I definitely don't hug people I've just met. That never, ever happens. And he didn't give me the choice. This is not cool. This is seriously not cool. Don't do it. You got to respect people's feelings. You got to respect their physical boundaries. Isn't this common knowledge by now? Do some of us still need to learn this lesson? I mean, certainly as it regards men, women, Me Too movement, all of that, men putting their hand on women's waists, like they somehow have the right to do that. This is not okay. All right. It's never been okay. It used to be way more common. I think it's much less common now. God, I hope it is. You ought to know better. So that, yeah, physical interaction with people has to be consensual, regardless of gender. And this guy just took me in for a big old hug. And again, this was right at the end, or near the end, this transition period of COVID. I'd been fully vaxxed, but I don't know about this guy. And as it turned out, I only learned later that he and his whole damn family got COVID like the week after we met. Because none of them were vaxxed because they're all of that ilk. So I guess this goes way beyond my initial pet peeve. And that was that people who are kind of unrelentingly kind, because it just made me think of this guy. He was just overly friendly all the time. He was just so filled with love. Just nothing but helpfulness and kindness until you just wanted to slap him. Yeah, the whole hug incident and all that was kind of tangential. But I just happened to think of this guy because that was his personality, or it is his personality. Well, I've used practically the entire episode here, just chatting with you about spur-of-the-moment thoughts. I guess we'll just have to finish there. Little stream of consciousness going. Profile pictures, profile pics, or pictures generally on social media. Here's another pet peeve. You can take it or leave it. It's strictly a personal opinion. For those of you using filters, now the funny little rabbit ear filters, and you get the bunny nose or whatever, the whiskers. Now, I personally think that's juvenile and ridiculous and stupid. But if you're into it, I say go for it. I think if you find that funny and cute, then this just our differences. Just different. Okay, fine. But the more standard filters that take away all your blemishes and make your lips a little fuller and your face a little thinner and your eyes a little bigger, and it's just they're supposed to be so subtle. Here's the personal opinion part. They look really stupid. You don't look like a human being. You look like some kind of a fucking wax doll. Even the really subtle ones. It's like we all see this. We all see it. Now again, that's just personal opinion. If you like the way it looks, if that's the way you want to present yourself, fine. Go ahead, do it. With this one warning, I'm here to tell you, like a good friend tells another good friend, hey, you got a booger hanging out of your nose. You know, you got that little saliva buildup in the corner of your mouth. It's making you look gross. You want to wipe it off. A good friend will do that for you, right? Okay, so if this serves you at all, I'm here to tell you, everybody knows what you're doing. And I don't know how everybody else feels about it, but I think you look really stupid with the filter thing happening. So if you're doing it to please other people, and if you think that they can't tell, then I'm here serving as your friend to tell you, yes, we can all tell, and it looks ridiculous. Okay? So cut that out. And let me close with this. Some unsolicited advice from a real friend. Here's something you want to stop doing. All right? And this goes back again to social media. Stop using the phrase, my office, for where you're working that day. I have friends who are musicians, and they'll often have their setup ready to go at their gig. And maybe it's a particularly nice setting, and they'll take this picture of this beautiful, beautiful setting, and they'll say, this is my office for the night. Unsolicited free advice from a true friend. My God, that's the most obnoxious thing you can do. Please don't do that ever again. Please don't ever use the term my office. I also have a couple of friends who do modeling. Models often have to go to exotic locales. And they'll post that kind of, oh, my office. Actors. I have a lot of social media friends kind of in and around showbiz because I was in and out of that for much of my life. So they'll be on the set of some movie or TV show. And they'll take this glamorous shot. My office for the day. You can't imagine how obnoxious that makes you look. I mean, that's a big thing of what social media does. What am I doing today that's a little out of the ordinary? Maybe I'm on a trip to the Grand Canyon. Oh, look at me. Here I am at the Grand Canyon. There are ways to do this. There are definitely ways to do it. And there are ways to not do it. And my problem is I can't really define it. It's sort of like it's kind of like the Supreme Court ruling on porn. I know it when I see it. I know an obnoxious post when I see one. I can't really define exactly what it is. Like I have one social media friend who's really, really good at it. She's an artist, and often she'll share her art, which is a perfectly appropriate thing to do. An artist, you should share your art, share your paintings. That's great. Do it. But she also shares things like sunrises and sunsets. You know, I'm here looking at the sunrise over Lake Michigan. And she just has a way of doing it that is just so tasteful and so inspiring and kind of wonderful that I never for a second think that she's being pretentious or that she's bragging in any way. Like some people, speaking of sunrises and sunsets, maybe they'll take the sunset and they'll go out of their way to say, overlooking my deck or something, and show their glass of wine and their bare feet on the lounge chair, and then their beautiful deck and the beautiful foliage and then the beautiful sunset. It's like, isn't my life wonderful? Now that one, just don't do that. And again, I can't quite set the point of demarcation when an innocent, happy post becomes an utterly obnoxious post. But there is a point of demarcation. And try to stay on the right side of that. Yeah, I've got that one friend who just always just hits it out of the park. She really knows what she's doing. She has excellent taste, and her posts are always welcome and either just funny or kind or uplifting or at worst neutral. Like, hey, how you doing? Here I am having lunch. Hello. You know, it's great. Fine. Just checking in. And then there are others who just have to have some sort of agenda. They have to be I don't know, showing off or bragging, or it's really tough to define. I'll bet you know what I'm talking about. I bet you know it when you see it, right? All right. Okay. Well, there you go. Some useful information, some unsolicited advice, a couple of pet peeves, all of it today, strictly personal opinion. Please feel free to disagree with or ignore all of today's program. But as always, I love you. I'm Charles Purcell.